In this class, we learn the concept control statements. Okay, what is the need of control statements? That means if you are taking the program having the set of instructions. Okay, that means here the program starts from the main function. In the main function, we are writing the logic. Okay, suppose in the program we are having three lines. That is three instructions. Each line is called instruction. Okay, how the program is to be executed? All the instructions are executed sequentially, and each instruction is executed one time generally. Okay, suppose if the depending on the problem statement, if we need to skip some of the instructions, or if you want to execute the same instruction number of times, that is 10 times or 20 times, whatever it may be. Okay, then at that time we are using these control statements. Okay, so the control statements are three types. Those are branching statements, looping statements, and selection statements. Okay. Again, the branching statements is to be divided into conditional statements and unconditional statements. That is here. See. See here. The control statements are divided into branching statements, looping statements, and selection statements. Again, this branching is divided into conditional and unconditional. In conditional, we learn simply if else ladder, nested if else. In unconditional, we learn go to. Okay. Next, looping statements. Okay. These looping statements are used to execute the same number of instructions number of times. Okay. So, three loops are there, while loop, do while loop, and for loop. The selection statements. Okay. Depending on the case value, that is, depending on the variable value, we can execute some block of the statements that is related to selection statements. So, the example is switch statement. Okay. So, we learn one by one. What is the syntax of each one? Okay. So, here branching statements, conditional. These four belongs to the conditional, and unconditional. Go to belongs to unconditional statements. Okay. Now, take the first one, that is simple if. Okay. What is the syntax of this simple if? Okay. So, here we have to take the condition. Okay. Here we have to take the condition. If condition. If this condition is true, then statement 1 is to be executed. Okay, here how many statements are executed? If the condition is true, only one statement. Okay, another way is also there, that is, this is also the same. Here, if the condition is to be true, then these two statements are to be executed. What is the difference between these two? See here. Here we are not giving the curly brackets in the first one, because here only one statement is to be executed. So no need of curly brackets here. Suppose if the condition is true, then if we want to execute more number of statements, then compulsory we have to give the curly brackets for the number of statements. Okay, this is the syntax of if simple if statement. Okay, the next one is if else. If else means here, if the what is the syntax? If in brackets we have to give the condition, and here this is the syntax of if else. Here, if the condition is true, then statement 1 is to be executed. If the condition is false, then comes to the else block and statement 2 is to be executed. That means here, based on the condition, we have to execute either statement 1 for statement 2. That means this statement 1 belongs to true block. This statement 2 belongs to false block. Okay. So this is if else. The next one is if else ladder. Okay. So here we have to check many number of conditions by using if else ladder. Okay. If you take previous if else, here we check only one condition. Here in this if else ladder, we have to check many number of conditions. Okay. The syntax is if check the condition 1. If the condition 1 is true, statement 1 is to be executed. Else if the next condition is to be checked. Suppose if the condition 1 is false, coming to the condition 2. If the condition 2 is true, statement 2 is to be executed. Suppose if the condition 2 is also false, then coming to the next condition, that is condition 3. If the condition 3 is true, then statement 3 is to be executed. Like this, check one by one condition in sequential order. Like this. Depending on the problem statements, we have to get number of conditions. If all the conditions are false, then coming to the last else block and statement 10 to be executed. Okay, this is the syntax of if else ladder. Okay, the next one is nested if else. Nested if else. Nested if else means here, see here. This is the syntax. Here first check the condition 1. Okay, if the condition 1 is to be true, then coming to the true block. True block also checks another condition, that is condition 2. Okay, so true block, that means inside if condition, we have to check another if condition. This belongs to the nested if else. Depending on the problem statement, we have to use the nested if else. Here, suppose if the condition 1 is false, then directly coming to here, statement 3 is to be executed. Okay. If condition 1 is true, coming to the true block, again checking the condition 2. If condition 2 is true, then statement 1 is to be executed. If the condition 2 is false, then statement 2 is to be executed. Like this, first write the syntax, next write the points like this. Okay, so those 4 belongs to conditional branching statement. The next one is unconditional branching statement, that is go to. Okay, so here what is the syntax of this go to means? Here we have to use the keyword go to and label name. We have to give the label name. Okay, depending on the problem statement, we have to follow the number of statements. Okay, so here, see here, this is the syntax. Go to label name means without checking any condition, search about this label name. Wherever that label name is to be found, the controller goes to that label name and executed the following statements. Okay. So the next one is looping statements. The looping statements are 3 loops. Those are while loop, do while loop, and for loop. Okay. First we discuss about while loop. Okay, what is the syntax of while loop? Here we have to check the condition, while condition. If this condition is true, then the following statements ought to be executed. Okay. Here we have to execute this statements number of times until the condition becomes false. Okay. The next one is do while loop. Okay. So here the syntax of this do while loop is do and following statements. After that while condition semicolon. Okay. Here first at least one time these statements ought to be executed in do while loop, because after executing the statements one time, then only the condition is to be checked here. Okay. That's why in do while loop, minimum one time the statements ought to be executed. Okay. The next one is for loop. Here The syntax of for loop is initialization, condition, increment or decrement. Okay. Initialization means like I equal to 1. Condition means like I is less than or equal 10. Increment or decrement means I plus plus or I minus minus. Like that, depending on the problem statement, we have to use for loop. Okay. Here, if this any the following statements ought to be there. Here, if the condition is true, then the following statements ought to be executed. Okay. Until the condition becomes false, the statements ought to be executed number of times. Okay. So this is the for loop. If we observe the while loop, do while loop, and for loop, here while loop and for loop are called entry controlled loop because after checking the condition only, the statements ought to be executed in while loop and for loop. In do while loop, first at least one time the statements ought to be executed. After that only the condition is to be checked. That's why this do while loop is called exit control loop. Okay, these three are belongs to loop conditions, loops. Okay, the next one is selection statements. That is switch statement. So switch statement means what is the syntax of this means? First we have to give the expression, which is the keyword. Here we have to take all the instructions, case constant one. Okay, if the expression belongs to constant one, then these statements ought to be executed. Here, the group of cases are there. That is, so many blocks are there. Out of all the blocks, only one block needs to be executed depending on the expression here. Okay. So, suppose if the expression belongs to constant one, then these statements ought to be executed. And here we have to use break. Break means that exit from the loop. Okay. See here. If expression belongs to constant one, these statements are executed and break means coming out. That means these are all not checked. Suppose if the expression not belongs to constant one, coming to next constant, then these statements ought to be executed like that. Suppose if this expression not belongs to any constant, then coming to default block, and these statements ought to be executed. That means out of all the groups, only one group needs to be executed based on the given expression. Okay, this is the syntax of switch statement. So these are belongs to control statements.